Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this special Christmas edition of the Ignition News. We started the Ignition News in late 2025 to bring you unfiltered, uncensored, raw updates about what's actually happening in the United States of America. Listen, we shouldn't be having to bootleg copies of the news in America, in our own country, to find out what is happening in our own country, which is why it's important for you now to follow along with The Ignition. The Ignition is your updated, unfiltered, uncensored news. We're here every other day for your top news stories, quick, unfiltered takes that you can digest, get on with your day, and continue to fight for your democracy. Now let's get into it. If you're new to the show, please consider subscribing at any of your favorite platforms. You can find us broadcasting in all of our platforms at theignition.news. Let's get into it. We are your daily news podcast for up-to-date, unfiltered, uncensored news about what's actually happening in the United States with a truth-leaning perspective. We launched this, obviously, really quickly after what happened with CBS, but this has been in the works for a while. Of course, I want to remind you, everybody, that today, December 25th, Merry Christmas. On Christmas Day, here, as I said, we are having to bootleg a copy of 60 Minutes to watch what's happening in our own country. But I've got a special gift for you. This show is here for you for free. If you're new here and you're wondering, by the way, we have also built a podcast called The Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise, which is a toolkit for you to become a local resistance figure in your community. We don't just talk about calling Congress. We teach you how to fix the potholes in front of your house. Our show today is brought to you by Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. Let's get into it. Our first story of the day. House Republicans are fleeing their own disaster. Our first story, first up today. House Republicans are literally running away from their own mess. A record 10 House Republicans are fleeing Congress to run for governor in 2026. That's the most from either party since 1974. And they're jumping ship, citing frustration with what they're calling a toxic environment. Oh, gee, I wonder how that happened. And overall dysfunction in Washington. So get this. 13 total lawmakers, mostly from the Republican Party, are running for governor, with 11 in the House alone. That breaks all previous records. Of course, they're saying that this is because they think they can better enact the Trump agenda at the state level, but the translation obviously is they're abandoning the national stage because they can't get anything done and they're about to get absolutely destroyed in the midterms. The irony here, of course, is beautiful. They built everything around this one person, around Trump. They have control of both chambers and the White House and effectively the Supreme Court. And, as Representative Nancy Mace actually said, GOP leadership is ineffective. And these aren't vulnerable seats either, by the way. Most of the Republicans leaving are in safe districts. So it's not necessarily about electoral vulnerability, but it is about the absolute disaster that is the current Republican Party. And despite Speaker Mike Johnson's confidence, many in the GOP are worried about losing control of the House in the 2026 midterms. In fact, it is possible that if enough members of the House resign, that we could have a democratically controlled House before the midterms. We'll see what happens. Welcome, everybody, to the Ignition News. And Merry Christmas. Speaking of Christmas, I have a special fun story update for you. Of course, the Queen of Christmas, Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas Is You. Here's a fun little story. Mariah Carey didn't just defend her holiday crown, she made the people who challenged her for it pay for it big time. If you're not aware, she was involved in some litigation around that song. And recently, a federal judge just ordered the plaintiffs who sued her over that song, All I Want for Christmas, to fork over $92,000 in sanctions and fees. So that's actually totaling over $110,000. So basically what happened, if you weren't aware of this story, is in November 2023, a couple people sued Mariah Carey for $20 million, claiming that the 1994 song All I Want for Christmas Is You copied their 1989 song with the same title. That case was dismissed, but Mariah Carey did not just dismiss the case. She went back on offense and she called that claim egregious. So she got her sanctions, $92,000. She defended her title as the Christmas Queen. Meanwhile, while she's defending herself in court, her song is extending its 21st week on number one's Billboard Top 100, and it has surpassed Dua Lipa's Levitating as the longest charting song ever by a female artist. Actually didn't know that. Dua Lipa, Levitating. Wow, who knew? Speaking of Christmas songs, I've got another update for you here on the Ignition News. It's an example of American resistance in the form of protest. People always ask us, what can I do to resist authoritarianism? Well, let me tell you what one musician did. So, and actually, this one kind of pisses me off, by the way. Musician Chuck Red canceled the Kennedy Center's annual Christmas Eve Jam. That was a holiday tradition dating back more than 20 years. And he did that in protest of Trump's name being added to the Kennedy Center. Red, who is a drummer and a vibraphonist who has led the concert since 2006, pulled the plug after seeing the name change last Friday. The Board of Trustees voted to rename the facility the Donald J. Trump and the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for the Performing Arts, or for short, the Trump Kennedy Center. But here's the problem, everyone. Passed a law in 1964 naming the center as a living memorial to JFK. And that law, by the way, expressly prohibits the Board of Trustees from making that name change. So, by slapping the name on the building, they're literally violating federal law. Well, how did that happen, you're asking yourself? Well, if you weren't aware, the president actually completely stacked the board with allies and basically took over the board, and then they named him as chairman of the board. So, where that governance has failed, performance artists have stepped up, by the way. Numerous artists have also called off Kennedy Center performances since Trump returned to office, and looks like it's going to continue. So, they broke a law to put his name on the building, and people are standing up. Our next story. The DOJ finds 1 million more Epstein documents. Welcome back to the Ignition News, everybody. The Department of Justice just announced that they've discovered over 1 million additional documents related to Jeffrey Epstein and that they plan to release those in the days and weeks ahead. This announcement comes after they already blew past the December 19th deadline mandated by federal law to release all the files. The DOJ claims they have lawyers working around the clock to review and redact the document, but it could take a few more weeks. We covered this yesterday in the show. They actually called in lawyers on Christmas Eve to come redact these documents. But here's the problem. The law specifically says you can only redact victim identity and information related to ongoing criminal investigations. Those are the only two things that redactions are allowed for. But the documents that have already been released, right, they've actually included incorrect documentation because they did such a bad job at redacting the documents that people have found exploits and ways to get around the redactions. The law, by the way, expressly says you can't redact information just because it's embarrassing. Nonetheless, they missed the deadline, and now they suddenly found 1 million more documents. This is the same playbook from this administration related to Epstein, and it's getting really tiring. It's getting really old. But the playbook is delay, redact, protect the power. Well, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are starting to call out the buff and the bullshit on this, and they're demanding action. We might well see Pam Bondi impeached over this, and if so, well, there might finally be accountability in this area. Our next story on the Ignition News. Before we get on to that, I do want to remind you that the Ignition News is sponsored by Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise, our signature podcast, a toolkit to help you fight and protect your democracy. Our next story, the economy is tanking. The economy is tanking, and Americans know it. Consumer confidence just crashed harder than a lead balloon. The Conference Board just dropped their latest numbers. Consumer confidence fell for the 5th straight month in December. It's at 89.1 right now. Basically, that's back to where it was in April when they rolled out tariffs. The expectation index, this is a number that tells us what Americans think is coming, is sitting at 70.7. Anything on the expectation index that is below 80 tells us that a recession is likely coming. We've been told that, we've actually been below that threshold for 11 consecutive months. Think about that. 11 months we've been below that threshold. Of course, we know the employment rate is 4.6%, which is the highest since 2021. Job creation has completely collapsed. Since March, we're averaging about 35,000 jobs per month, and that was compared to 71,000 the year before. Jerome Powell is saying basically it's about to get revised even lower. And what that means is it's worse than they're even telling us. Americans are saying that pricing and inflation are their biggest concern, along with tariffs. But almost half of Americans expect tariffs to raise their cost of a living. Meanwhile, only 21% think that it will create new jobs. And here, my friends, is the detail that should scare you. For the first time in nearly 4 years, consumers' views of their own family's current financial situation went negative. People are worried about their own finances, and it's actually higher than it was before the pandemic recovery. And when it comes to the job market, economists are telling us that we're stuck in what is called a low hire, low fire state. Businesses aren't hiring because they don't know what Trump's going to do with the next tariffs. They're not firing because they're not sure if they're going to need those people. And people aren't leaving their jobs because they feel insecure in their current employment. So let's be clear. The president promised you a booming economy. He promised prosperity. He promised winning. Instead, we've got 5 straight months of declining consumer confidence, rising unemployment, rising prices, collapsed job creation, and now Americans are more worried about their family finances than they've been since before pandemic recovery. Well, isn't that a nice little bow wrapped up for Christmas, everybody? Let's lighten the mood, if we will. Thank you for joining us here on the Ignition News, your daily podcast for truth, act, uncensored news. Brought to you, of course, by Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise. Let's change the tone a little bit and let's talk a positive story. Fox is suing the administration for $54 million. If you haven't heard this, here's some welcome good news. It's a little Christmas present for you. Crocs, yes, the little ugly foam shoes, Crocs. Someone, obviously, I don't know why. People love Crocs. I must admit, I have 2 pairs of Crocs. I do love the Crocs that I have. I'm not gonna lie. But they filed a lawsuit in Friday in the U.S. Court of International Trade in New York. They want the Trump administration to refund them their tariffs plus interest that they've said that they've already paid. Well, and they're basically suing everyone. By the way, they're suing Bessent, Trump, the use of the IEP, which is the Emergency Economic Powers Act. And it's not just about the $54 million. Check this out. This is pretty devastating. In 2024, Crocs recorded a net loss of $492.3 million compared with a profit of $228 million in the same quarter 2024. Everyone, that is a swing of $700 million. That is revenue dropping 6.2% in the third quarter, and they're expecting an 8% drop in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, we could talk about the price of eggs, but nobody's talking about the price of Crocs, right? Like, that's an economic indicator. Almost $1 billion in economic swing for that one company alone. And, part of this is because, yes, Crocs does outsource most of its manufacturing. It's got manufacturing in Vietnam, China, India, Indonesia, and Mexico, all heavily tariffed, and they have been paying the price. The CEO of Crocs sent out a memo in April telling employees to basically batten down the hatches to cut expenses. And now Crocs has joined many other companies suing the administration for refunds. Big deal. The president said he would make America great. Well, if you're working at Costco right now, especially if there's the CEO, I don't know how much you're going to have to pay to be a great company, but so far they've paid $7. I hope Crocs wins this, plus every single penny, plus interest, by the way. Thank you for joining us here on the Ignition News, your quick updates to the facts that you need to know. We're going to go into a commentary piece because I need to kind of get this off my chest before we head out of the holidays. Everyone, I think, by the way, on this topic is wrong. Let's talk about Venezuela. The president has a much more damning plan for Venezuela than invading Venezuela. Let me talk about it. Here's what everyone in Washington is missing. Obviously, the president's probably not going to invade Venezuela, but that's not because he cares about people in Venezuela. He doesn't care about really anyone except himself. Venezuela has survived years of sanctions from the United States, 2 decades of economic warfare, and that has really exclusively been designed to destroy and strangle their economy. Well, they've found ways to survive and thrive in that nonetheless. And what I'm basically talking about, whether you agree or disagree with the Venezuelan administration, is the people of that country. One of the programs that the Venezuelan government is well known for is distributing fishing boats to its population to increase food stability. Do you have access to fishing boats, ports, ice chests, access, all those kinds of things? You can go out and you can go fish and have more food stability. Well, what happens, friends, when the United States military is blowing fishing boats out of the water? The answer is simple. Less food security. But what else are they doing? So now they're going after the oil. They're going after oil tankers. This is actually illegal under international law, by the way. The freedom of navigation on the high seas is basically a cornerstone of international maritime law, but now we're chasing down and taking oil tankers from Venezuela. The end result of this is basically a de facto war on Venezuela without approval from Congress, and we're going to start seeing pretty bad things from this. In Venezuela, we're going to see empty food shelves, malnourished children, overwhelmed hospital, people scavenging for food. It's going to look a lot like Gaza in Venezuela, and that is on all of us. And it's our tax dollars and our government doing it this time, not the government of Israel. We have to prevent basically economic genocide, which is what this is. The president is systematically destroying the conditions that allow the Venezuelan citizens to survive at home while simultaneously blocking them from leaving. If the conditions get so bad in Venezuela, we kind of expect millions of people to flee Venezuela, but where are they going to go? They're certainly not going to come to the United States. We've all but ended immigration. The thing about Venezuela is it's a test case. What's being refined right now is economic siege without the bombs. That's what's happening. It's a blueprint. Any country that refuses to sort of cooperate with the president is going to get this economic warfare. And the calculation behind this has obviously been used before. We've seen this happen in places like Cuba, right? But if this continues, if this economic siege continues, if the country is denied of the means to feed itself, well, hunger is going to do what bombs could not do, and it's going to destabilize the country of Venezuela. And for all of you who voted for this president because you voted for no new wars, and you think you can sleep better at night because you don't see bombs falling in Venezuela, but there are children going to sleep with empty bellies, well, guess what? You fucking voted for that too. And if you can sleep at night thinking that your actions unnecessarily harmed people who did nothing to you, and by the way, as we previously discussed, it's not resulting in you having a better economy. It's not resulting in you getting a better job. It's not resulting in you having cheaper access to food or more presents under your tree. And what? You just voted for cruelty to starve children in yet another country in the name of economic or national security? It's a joke. And what it is economic genocide. And if you are against the genocide in Gaza, which anyone with a morality should be, well, then you should be against the genocide in Venezuela, because that is what the administration is intending to perpetrate with this economic warfare that they're enacting on these people. I didn't vote for war in Venezuela. I voted to make your groceries cheaper. I voted to make it easier for you to have access to a small business. I voted for you to have more rights, not less rights. I voted for a president who wanted to focus on you, your country, your family, and this country, America first. We're talking about Venezuela, Argentina, Israel. When are we going to start worrying about the people in this country? The families in this country who need food, the children in this country who need food, the people in this country who need medicine, the children in this country who need education, the seniors in this country who need dignified long-term aged care. When are we going to start worrying about the people in this country and not the billionaires in the interest of the foreign countries who have nothing to do with us? Venezuela is not shipping fentanyl on fishing boats. The president is attacking fishing boats to starve the Venezuelan people, and they're doing it in your name. He's starving people in a foreign country on Christmas. I'll ask you what I just saw on the back of a 1998 Toyota the other day. What would Jesus do? That's my commentary from the Ignition News. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We're going to go ahead and get on to the next story. The Supreme Court just handed Trump a loss in deploying troops to Chicago, but actually what happened as a result of it, by the way, 3 of the 6 conservative judges told the president he could not deploy troops to Chicago. But Justice Kavanaugh carved out a little loophole in a footnote talking about the Insurrection Act. In that separate note, Justice Kavanaugh wrote a separate opinion where he basically laid out a blueprint for Trump to sidestep their ruling now. Kavanaugh said he agreed with blocking the Chicago deployment, but, and this is a big but, he would have left the president more latitude to deploy troops in possible future scenarios. Here's what the footnote says. He said the court's opinion does not address the president's authority under the Insurrection Act. Well, there it is, in writing. Let me translate that for you. What Kavanaugh just said is, hey, Trump, you lost this one, but here's how you can do it anyway. Just use the Insurrection Act and deploy the actual military instead of the National Guard. If you're not familiar, the Insurrection Act is a law from 1807 that allows the president to call on active duty or reserve active duty military to suppress rebellion. People use the term martial law. The president does not have the ability to declare martial law, but he can invoke the Insurrection Act, and the Insurrection Act has actually been invoked in the United States dozens of times. Supreme Court blocked him from sending troops to Chicago, but Justice Kavanaugh wrote him a beautiful little, here's the open door on how you do it, and we all need to be paying attention. We all need to be paying attention, because what's happening is people on the right, the sort of conservative pundit class, they're actively openly now calling on the president to use that Insurrection Act. And of course, this Supreme Court's order is not a final ruling, but it could affect other lawsuits challenging his ability to deploy the National Guard in other cities. This is authoritarianism, folks. This is what it looks like when democracy dies. Not just with a big bang, but with a Supreme Court footnote that basically tells the president he can declare the Insurrection Act. But I think, we'll close this out on this next story, I think part of that is unlikely because of another story that the media is actively not talking about. And it's something that here on the Ignition News, we're not hiding from anyone. That is the president's mental state. Trump is 79 years old, and throughout 2025, he's shown erratic and frankly weird behavior. So let's give you some highlights of what happened so far, okay? In July, the president told this bizarre rambling story about how his uncle taught the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, at MIT. The problem is Trump's uncle died in 1985, and Kaczynski was not even identified until 1996. And also, he didn't even study at MIT. So Trump just made the whole thing up. Later that month, during a meeting with European officials, the president abruptly switched from discussing immigration to ranting about windmills for 2 straight minutes. He claimed without evidence that they drive whales loco and that wind energy kills the birds. In September, the president summoned the country's top military commanders, and instead of discussing strategy, he went on a rambling rant about how he walks down the stairs. He was talking about how Obama bops down the stairs and has zero respect for Obama, but at least Obama can go down the stairs. What? And of course, in November, Trump went through an MRI, but he couldn't tell us what part of his body got the MRI. That same month, he fell asleep in the Oval Office. And again, it happened in another cabinet meeting in December. 2 weeks later, he fell asleep in a press conference. He's mixed up Albania and Armenia. During a speech about autism, you may famously recall that he mused about certain elements of genius that can be given to a baby. And he said, nothing bad can happen. It can only good happen. Do you remember when he said that? It can only good happen. His schedule has also been dramatically reduced. His schedule is down 39% compared to the first term. And this is in spite of the White House saying, oh, he's in excellent condition. He's in excellent condition. Fact of the matter is, he's getting old. It's very visible. It's very obvious. We'll see how that affects the midterms. And then the last story on the Ignition News, I want to give you a highlight on some international stories. Listen, everyone, I do appreciate you following along. If there's a story you think we need to cover on the Ignition News, please let us know. Put a comment on the podcast, send us a direct message. You can find out all of your updates about the Ignition at theignition.news. That's theignition.news, where you can find all of our platforms everywhere we're streaming. Please do consider sharing or supporting the show, your free news site, news source for updated, uncensored information. Let's get back into our final story, a look around the world. We've obviously talked a lot about America, right? But let's talk about what's helping around the world. First up, let's go to Russia. So Vladimir Putin does this thing where he has a direct call-in line show. It's kind of an annual tradition he does. So in December 19th, he had another call-in show. He gets a lot of obviously like softball questions from people. And he went on this weird rant about the whole reason that he went to war with Ukraine was because Europe wasn't respecting them. He literally said, there won't be any special operations if you treat us with respect. So just to clarify, he invaded a country, killed hundreds of thousands of people, placed millions of people because he wasn't getting respect. That's wild. He also was telling the people of Russia, kind of sounds familiar, by the way. He was telling the people of Russia that the economic slowdown was totally on purpose. It was totally fine. He basically said, you don't need $37, right? Yeah, the economy's tanking, inflation's through the roof, but he said that's all part of the plan. So things are not great on the Russian front. China, couple things I think you need to know about China. Chinese scientists in a secret lab just reverse engineered a critical piece of technology for making the world's most advanced semiconductors. Now, they're making a lot of progress, but they're not quite there yet. They're hoping to make their first prototype of these chips by 2028. Even if they hit that deadline, they're still going to be quite far behind. But the reason I bring this up is we're sitting here talking about a crazy tweet on Truth Social. Meanwhile, the entire government of China is engaging in a one-country effort to displace and remove themselves from being dependent on foreign chip technology. They're building their own chips, which then they can advance and make even better. And yes, they're playing catch-up, but they're almost caught up. That's the thing we need to worry about. They're also cracking down in Hong Kong. There's additional turmoil in Hong Kong. A lot of problem. And China also just successfully tested their CH-7, which is a new stealth drone designed for long-range reconnaissance. Another place I think you need to worry about is Iran. Iran is actually having significant water trouble. They may have to displace and actually relocate their capital city because they're running out of water. But because of the sort of rapidly evolving political landscape in Iran, believe this or not, they're also having their own strong advance of alt-right politics, essentially, where they're getting even more alt-right in Iran. So they called together 40,000 seminary students and conservative opinion leaders to create a massive government think tank. Basically, what they think that they need to do is basically change the conversation, change the narrative. So their regional influence significantly declining. The Iranian economy is basically in the toilet. There's no clear succession plan for future leadership in Iran. So they're trying to get all of their scholars in one place to basically control the narrative. Good luck with that, I guess. My point is, there is significant instability around the world right now. It's not just the United States of America, but that calls into question why we need strong, principled, trusting leadership in the United States of America. We might not have that now, but one of the ways that we can do that is by having an informed, smart, educated public. You can't do that if you don't know about what's actually happening in the world, which is why we brought you The Ignition News, your daily updates for truth, reliable news, and connectivity. Thanks, everyone. That's our December 25th episode.